So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, wherever you're watching us from. This is iGaming Africa, and we are happy to be bringing to you the 36th edition of the iGaming Africa webinars. And today we are going to be having a very, very interesting conversation around Nigeria and the future of the industry, or where we really anticipate to have the industry within the next 5 to 10 years, because the market is big, it's very promising. But then, what will make us to consider Nigeria a really mature and big market that everybody should really be proud of? So, and for today, we are joined by um, our experts from the industry in Nigeria. To begin with, we have Arinze Arun, the Executive Secretary or CEO of the Enugu State Gaming and Lotteries Board. And then also, secondly, we have Olafadeke Akeju, the founder at Select Africa, also engaged at WYS Solicitors. And also, we have Jesse Falodun, who is going to be moderating the session. He is from Gamble Alert. And of course, we are therefore welcoming you to be part of this session. Engage with us via LinkedIn and YouTube. We have a live stream there. So you can drop a comment or a question. And at the end of the session, we are going to be, of course, sampling some of the feedback that you give. But then I will give each of the panelists a minute or two to tell us about themselves and what they do. And then, of course, we'll proceed with the session. I can start with Olafadeke, because they usually say ladies first. And then we can go to Arinze, and lastly, Jesse. And of course, looking forward to this discussion. My name is Jeremiah Maangi, the Chief Executive Officer at iGaming Africa.
Hi, Jeremiah, and thank you for having me on this webinar. My name is Olafadike Akeju. As you have introduced, I am the managing partner at Wise Solicitors. I'm a legal practitioner by profession, and I'm also the founder of Select Africa, a capacity building platform providing industry intelligence, training and development, building the workforce for the gaming industry, and of course providing the much needed support for the African gaming markets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Jeremiah. My name is Arinze Arum. I'm the Executive Secretary and CEO of Enugu State Gaming and Lottery Commission. I'm a regulator in charge of the industry in Enugu State, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arinze. Jesse.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Jesse Falodun, and I'm the head of media in Gamble Alert. And I'm your moderator for today.
Okay, thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you, Arinze. Thank you, Fadeke. So, of course, before we get into the discussion, it is important for us to also appreciate the sponsors or the companies that are making these conversations possible. So I request that we take a minute to show you a few of the things that the sponsors are actually doing. Back to you, the admin, please. Okay, thank you so much, admin. So also, so that is appreciating the companies that are making it possible for us to have this. Thank you, BetConstruct AI. Thank you, OneWin. And as well, thank you, SoftSwiss. All these companies, we invite you to come and see some of the solutions you can get from them for your brand. Also, to appreciate companies that are also collaborating with us so that we can make this possible again. I'll like to mention iGaming Africa Summit, which is coming to you next year, the second edition, that is, in Nairobi, Kenya, from the 4th to 6th of May 2027, and as well iGaming Consult Africa, which is a consulting agency helping brands to penetrate across the African continent. Please, just a minute for that, and then we go into the conversation. Yeah, thank you so much. We can now proceed. Jesse, the moderator, please. Okay, so as Jesse works on the connection, we can begin the conversation. Arinze and Fadeke, if we were to look at Nigeria's iGaming industry 5 years from now, to be specific, what are the major things that must happen today for Nigeria to generally become Africa's premier iGaming market, right? This is the question we'll be trying to answer within the course of this session today. And therefore, the webinar is an opportunity to identify specific actions rather than simply discussing problems, as we have always seen it happening whenever people are talking about the Nigerian gaming sector. And the theme for this discussion is actually strategies for regulation, responsibility, and growth. And that is why we have Arinze, we have Olafadeke, we have Jesse here. And of course, a gift from the Association of Nigerian Bookmakers, who was not able to join us because of unavoidable circumstances, is also part of this discussion. So the first question, therefore, for this session will be to Arinze as a regulator in the room. With the evolving relationship between the federal and state regulators, what regulator frameworks is needed to create clarity, consistency, and certainty for operators and investors looking at Nigeria? And this is an important question, Arinze, because in your presentation at the recently concluded Enugu Gaming Conference, I think you insisted that there is a lot of antagonism or fights between regulators and operators, and these two parties are always seen as enemies. Is this one of the things we need to fix for Nigeria to be considered really a good market?
Well, thank you very much, Jeremiah. I think the starting point is to recognize that the regulatory certainty does not necessarily mean that every regulatory function must sit in one place. You understand? Nigeria is a federation, and different institutions, have legitimate responsibilities. The real issue, which is ensuring that these responsibilities are clearly defined and that they work together. Operators, what operators and investors need is clarity. There's no doubt about that. What they need is clarity. Who regulates what? What standards apply? What the licensing requirement is? What the tax obligation is? And then what happens, when there is non-compliance? See, when there is clarity, it helps, the investor to plan properly. And that's what we're saying. So rather than creating, layers of regulation that create confusion, we should be moving towards greater coordination. Coordination is key. Greater coordination, information sharing, harmonization of standards, where appropriate, of course. Then from if you look at if you look at it from the state's perspective, our responsibility is also to make our own rules clear, predictable. Predictability is key, and of course, consistently enforced. An investor should not, have to guess what the regulator expects, because ultimately, certainty is itself an economic incentive. Because if you create, a very predictable market in terms of regulation, whereby the players, and when I say players, I mean, all stakeholders involved are clear on what is required, on the standards, on the policy. I mean, it creates the confidence needed, for investment inflow. So if investors understand the rules and trust that those rules, will be applied, of course, they are much more willing to put long-term capital, into the market, and that's what we're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, before I go to Fadeke, there is a very important point you have brought there around the creation of confidence amongst the investors, because these are one of the major parties within the industry. And my question again to you, on regulation as an enabler for growth and actually creation of that investment appetite. How can regulation really move beyond simply controlling the industry and instead become a tool for attracting investment, right? Encouraging innovation and supporting the long-term growth of Nigeria's gaming sector. Of course, you can give us your feedback on that, but as well, I would like to hear what Fadeke can add to whatever you're going to tell us, please.
Yes, yes. For one, I think regulation should not just be about you know waiting to get the revenue you can from the operators. It's not just dictating what the operator should do. I think regulation should move towards, being co-drivers, of the industry instead of sitting behind to tax whatever innovation that has been brought forward by the industry. Regulators should also be part, of development, be contributors of the development. Because if you decide to extract maximum revenue from the industry, you're not supporting sustainability, which is the ultimate aim. Creating a sustainable market. It's better you build a ecosystem that is sustainable, and you being part of that, sustainability can drive your revenue long term than trying to extract what maximum revenue or whatever you can at the moment, thereby stifling the growth of that industry. So yes, regulation should move from where we are now, which is mainly revenue focused, to a more collaborative uh, uh, venture where the regulator and then the operators and all the value chain in the ecosystem, work together. As you know, the industry is no longer between regulators and then the traditional, conventional operators and the lottery or the betting companies. We've had, of course, technology builders, we have payment service providers, we've had, game developers, a whole lot of, subsectors are beginning to, come in and working together, expanding the industry. So the regulators should also look at that. And some of the players in the industry are not directly under the control of your traditional gaming regulator. So having this knowledge, will also help in shaping how the regulation works going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arinze. Fadeke, your input on the same question, please.
Thank you. Since we're speaking specifically about Nigeria, it's interesting that you say, oh, Nigeria should be a premier frontier market. So yes, that's what we'll try to highlight in this conversation. Now, first off, Nigeria attracts investment, but the question is the investment long-term investment? To attract long-term investment, as Marinzi mentioned, the regulatory framework must certainly deliver certainty. There must be certainty. Where there is regulatory certainty, definitely capital will follow, investment will follow, because the average investor should be able to and is able to predict what the cost of license is, can make projections on taxes within the jurisdiction, can even make projections around the cost of compliance. What an investor would struggle to project or price into its investment is uncertainty. So a market that is attractive is one, where regulatory framework is clear, where the investors knows what obligations they are under, how long the approval process will take, and rules, where rules are likely to change, there is proper structure and there is information well ahead of time. Also, there is room to allow for compliance. Now, investment-friendly regulation does not mean that there should be a reduction. It's not about the quantity. Rather, it's about the quality. It's about coherence. It's about removing duplications in regulatory frameworks, right? It's about ensuring that there are no competing demands as we find, right now in the market. It seems like operators are constantly, having to read between the lines in terms of where regulation lies. With the current structure where states states have the powers to regulate, and some of them have decided to come together to form a coalition. One thing that we have seen is that coalition, it seems like there's still a bit of uncertainty around it, as we find that sometimes you've got 20 or 25 states who are members, and then the next day you find a situation whereby maybe one or two of those member states have dropped off, which means that potentially you can resume, or rather an operator can be licensed in a certain jurisdiction today, and by the next morning you find out that, because there has been regulatory changes or because the state has pulled out from the regulatory structure that you have subscribed to as an operator, you have become an illegal operator. This should not be the case. Also, when there are changes to the rules, maybe there are tax reforms, there should be sufficient time allowance for implementation. There should be engagement before rules are introduced, to the gaming ecosystem. Now, secondly, a mature regulator should not treat every operator as a potential offender from day one. So this would ensure that the relationship between regulator and operators is not adversarial, right? Licensing should determine, at the point of licensing, you determine the fitness and capability of an operator. However, once the licensee becomes operational, then you have to ensure that there is consistent supervision to ensure compliance. It's not enough for regulators or the regulatory framework to just focus on licensing without actually thinking about what happens consistently in terms of monitoring at intervals. And then an investor wakes up, invests in a market, 2 years down the line, you're being called to question for what happened 2 years ago when you were in the market. So monitoring and supervision must be more consistent. There must be regular check-ins to ensure that, the relationship between regulators and operators does not become adversarial, as mentioned by Arinze. Also, more importantly, in today's world, is that regulation should also enable innovation. There should, just as businesses are upgrading their rules, their processes, and procedures to accommodate, innovations and technological advancement, so should regulators be educating themselves and understanding the technologies that are emerging. Regulators should understand digital payments. They should understand AI automated KYC, geolocation, player risk monitoring, and maybe the new products that are being introduced into the market. Perhaps this would also include looking at our legislations and our laws and ensuring that, we develop rules that are fit, for the innovative era that we find ourselves. We cannot seek to fit rules developed for retail operations around the innovation that is going on right now. So some of the things that regulators could consider, maybe have controlled pilot scheme or regulatory sandbox. For instance, we have prediction market. This is becoming a hot topic, more or less, in the industry. Is it gambling? Is it not gambling? Should it be regulated by gambling? Should it be regulated by a different regulatory structure? Those are still questions that are up in the air. It's not enough for the regulator to wake up and say, oh, we've started regulating this. Rather, there should be pilot schemes, and then consultation with stakeholders. Finally, there needs to be a reframe of the concept of regulatory growth. Regulators should not simply consider, the number of licenses that are issued or the revenue that is generated to government or the gaming taxes that is paid as the indicators or the measures of growth. Rather, other indicators like consumer protection, market integrity, and again, ensuring that innovation does not that the safeguards that are in place actually match innovations and development. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fadeke, for that well elaborated insight. I think you might also have read into my next question, which was around building a mature market, like the biggest obstacles currently holding the industry in Nigeria back. But of course, I think we will also want to hear what Arinze has to say about that when we get to that question. But I think Jesse is back. Jesse, if you can hear me, I can hand it over to you to take us to the investment opportunity, because I think this is also an important area that we need to look at. What are the existing opportunities before we even look at the challenges and how we can solve them? But then what are the opportunities within the market? Jesse, to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremiah, for holding down for me. I apologize. It was due to network failure. Now, if you can hear me clearly, talking about investment opportunities, we have seen Nigeria being a pioneering market, especially in Africa. And looking at the several investment platforms, what are the biggest opportunities, both existing and untapped, that should be attracting local and international investors? I think this question is supposed to go to a regulator. Let's start from Mr. Rinze. What do you think are the biggest opportunities looking at the Nigerian market that are tapped, the ones that are existing, and the ones that are yet untapped? I want to hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the industry moving, consistently and even in a fast pace into a complete digital world. It's safe to say that the industry will soon be classified or soon, join the digital economy ecosystem. Digital economy in the sense that, the rate, with which, technology innovation is driving the system. I mean, it's up there. So, and there are a lot of opportunities in the digital world. I mean, we have very robust, homegrown talent in the digital world who are, of course, making their marks. So I believe that, you know, um, um, the human capital is there. We talk about the develop homegrown, developers, innovators in the industry. We part of the conversations during the Enugu Gaming Conference is who builds the technology that drives the industry. Do we constantly rely on foreign and imported technology, or can we invest and promote the local content, the local talent that we have? And I believe that our opportunity lies in the homegrown, in the local, technology that we have the manpower, we have the talent, just what we lack is the needed investment in the development of that. That is one key area I believe that, if strengthened, can actually improve and, of course, grow the industry. What we have currently is importation of technology and then capital flight, because we pay for these technologies, in foreign currencies, and just what it is, capital flight. If we find a way to, make sure that the technology we use are developed here, and by so doing, we cut down on the capital flight, plug in the proceeds, the revenue back into the Nigerian market. It's what it will do is to I would say catapult the industry in Nigerian, and place the market, of course, where it's supposed to be, as of course, as the team says, at as the premier market in Africa. But the key thing we need to invest in, the key thing we I believe that we have to take seriously is how we build a homegrown and a local technology that can cater for the industry. Of course, that cannot happen without a proper investment in, of course, R&D and the actual production. But bottom line, we have to grow our market by investing in the local technology ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want a brief follow-up conversation with Olafadeke. Looking at the legal point of view and regulations, I heard you saying the other time the need for clarity, especially when it comes to laws, rules, and regulation. What would be, if you had the opportunity to change anything in just one word or in one sentence rather, what would be that one thing that you feel will bring a boost to the economy of the country and bring the iGaming system into a mature market? Okay, I don't know if we can't hear you.
So what I would say to that, if there was one thing I would change, it would be an assessment. Can you hear me now?
Definitely, we can hear you.
Okay, it would be an assessment of the gaming value chain in Nigeria. And then we'll be asking the question, how much of that can we own in Nigeria? If Nigeria wants to become Africa's premier iGaming market, success cannot just mean that Nigerians are Africa's biggest consumers of gaming product. It should also mean that Nigeria becomes one of Africa's leading producers and exporters of gaming technology, intellectual property, talent, and regulatory expertise. I mean, Nigeria is known for its large population, its people, but when you look at the iGaming industry, you find out that we are recycling more or less the same, talents within the pool, right? Can that pool be expanded to in such a way that Nigeria then becomes an exporter of, talent for the gaming industry? That would be one when we're talking about the people. Now, when we're talking about the technology, is it possible that in terms of the B2B technology, which to my mind is one of the biggest opportunities, is the ability for us to localize and develop sportsbook, casino platform, aggregation, customer relation management platforms, odds and data services. If we can, this is a gap that exists in the market, and it is one of the reasons why, as much as the Nigerian gaming industry generates immense and significant revenue from, the gaming activity, it doesn't retain much of that revenue. Much of that revenue is paid out in capital flight to investors and also to service providers, also to personnel. Meanwhile, Nigeria is the populous nation of Africa, the most populous nation in Africa, and significant in the world as well. How is it that we're experiencing capital flight for the payment of personnel? Those are the opportunities, that I see. And if I was a regulator, again, if I was a regulator again, those are the things I probably will be looking at. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's go to Mr. Arinze. Now, what would you say? We're talking about building a mature market. Now, what would you say are the biggest obstacles currently holding the Nigerian iGaming industry back? Now, this includes unlicensed operators, taxation, enforcement, and regulatory fragmentation. And what do you think needs to be changed to consumer market mature? Now, if you take this just means that if you take an entire study of the current Nigerian iGaming industry, um, looking at the loopholes, what would you say needs to change for the market to be considered mature?
Yeah, thank you. Um, I would identify four major issues. Fragmentation. You know, fragmentation. Responsibilities are unclear. We've stated that before. Responsibilities are unclear, and the regulatory requirements appear inconsistent. It creates uncertainty, and Fadeke alluded to that earlier, when she was trying to explain what happens, the uncertainty with the uh, association of states. You are in today, tomorrow you are out. I mean, it creates that uncertainty. It's a problem. So the fragmentation is there, and also we have a union of states. We have states that are not also part of that union. So again, fragmentation. It creates uncertainty. The second one is what I call informality. All right, informality. Um, the unlicensed market. A mature market cannot have legitimate operators carrying the full burden of compliance. And regulators tend to focus on legitimate, duly licensed operators in all compliance policies and all that, while illegal operators are the one actually causing real problems for the industry, and they compete without these obligations. So we need what do you call it, effective enforcement, and of course technology enabled enforcement will continue to tackle illegal operation. So the challenge is tackling illegal operation and black market, operation within the ecosystem, so that the legitimate businesses, have a needed protection, to run their business. So third is taxation, which is the burning issues, with the industry. I'm happy with the recently, enacted and law, the Nigerian Tax Act, that brought together all these things. I think gaming was also taken care of in that. So the tax obligation, has somewhat, been addressed. Government has a legitimate interest also in revenue, as we know, but the tax must be structured, in a way that allows the legitimate industry again to remain viable. Um, of course, the objective should be sustainable revenue, and not to simply, extract maximum revenue today, but a way that, again, the revenue collection also should reflect the realities of the industry at each point. Of course, taking into account, or intentionally supporting the sustainability of the industry. And then we need to build, you know, um, we need to build a culture of compliance. All right, compliance, and this is on the part of operators. Most of the conflicts, most of the conflict between regulators and operators, as much as regulators have their own responsibility, in in ensuring a harmonious and a well-structured ecosystem. The operators also must imbibe the culture of compliance. That is very important. Whatever the regulator does, however the regulator wants to move, if there is no willing compliance, if there is no transparency, on their conflict will always be there. Yeah, we understand that, of course, Nigerian market being fragmented, by way of our law. Some jurisdictions are still trying to, get a hold of the industry in their states, by of course enacting laws, coming up with regulations and all that. Some other jurisdictions have gone technological in their regulation. So when operators fail to understand that some of these states actually had knowledge on the innovations skill of the operators, demanding compliance. Regulators should not demand compliance. Operators should, ensure compliance to the regulations, the rules, covering the ecosystem. It should not be something an operator considers only when the regulator arrives. You shouldn't wait for regulator to prompt you to comply, because you entering into the market, of course, you take a look at what the market is and all that. Of course, you are not coming in intending to not comply. No, you want to comply to the regulation of that jurisdiction where you're operating. So it should be embedded, in the way your business operates. For me, mature market is one where the rules are clear and then compliant operators are protected. Because if you are compliant, of course, there's no reason why a regulator should not or would not really, in its responsibility, protect a legitimate, compliant, and of course, tax-paying operator, uh, which is what we preach as regulators. We want to be partners in the progress, and the development of the industry and then in the market. But also the operators also have responsibility of ensuring that the rules are followed, the regulations are adhered to, you know, especially as it concern player protection, proper records, reports, and of course audit, trials. So it goes both ways. So these are challenges. I believe that if well tackled, well handled, it will take us a step further, to the mature and a more robust market that we want the Nigerian market to that level we want Nigerian market, to attain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. And if I do hear you clearly, I'm going to be picking a cue now. There has been much ado about regulators and operators, but we all know that these are not the major entities in the markets. We have the control, we have the providers, but yet we have to talk about the consumers. And I would like to direct my question to Olafadeke, because you have been in advisory for a while. Now, let me ask, and I'm going to be stringing two questions together, if you can hear me clearly. What would you say responsible gaming would look like in Nigeria? What has it looked like in the or rather, what would responsible gaming look like in the next 5 years? And how can regulators, operators, and industry stakeholders work together to ensure that growth does not come at the expense of player protection? And how would we say, in a more certain way, that regulators, operators, and industry associations move from the often adversarial relationship towards greater transparency, dialogue, and collaboration? You mentioned that when I came on the call about disparities between those power movers. But then, how do we make sure that dialogue and collaboration works? And where would you see responsible gaming in the next 5 years? Because in growth, other things should be looked at. You can't just ask the child to grow and then you're not changing. It's not a one size fits all situation. How do we fit player protection into the growth that we are looking at in the next 5 years?
Okay, thank you. So two-part question. I'll start with the latter and then go back to the former. So in terms of how stakeholders generally can move from adversarial relationship towards greater transparency, what I'd like to say right here is that regulators and operators should not always agree. Healthy regulation requires independence, and consistent agreement between all parties is it's in itself has embedded challenges. The goal is harmony, or rather the goal is not harmony, rather it is constructive engagement, constructive disagreement within a framework that both the operators and the regulators can trust. So when we talk about collaboration does not necessarily mean that we have a regulatory framework that is subservient to the industry, and it does not mean operators always get the rules that they want. It means that decisions, whatever is decided, whatever rules that are made, are informed, and then the processes are transparent, and parties are allowed to disagree and resolve through structured, engagement rather than confrontation. So relationship does not need to be adversarial. There can be disagreements, but then parties have to understand that it's not personal sometimes. Now, I'll start with what perhaps some of the things that the regulators can do. Regulators may need to create channels for regular engagement. Now, a call for engagement after a directive or guideline or rule has already been issued is not consultation. Consultation should come before a directive is issued. The ideal process should be that regulators would publish or publicize, consultation papers before major reforms, and give significant time and for consideration, as well as reasons behind whatever rules are intended to be introduced, right? Then there should be regular industry forums. The regulators and operators and industry stakeholders should regularly come together to discuss some of these proposals before it becomes a directive, a guideline, a law, as it were, right? More importantly, decisions by regulators should be based on data and evidence and not assumptions. One of the key reasons why there's regular disagreements between operators, regulators, and stakeholder is because of the impression that decisions are made based on assumptions and not based on reality, which then brings me to the operators. Operators must, they have to earn the right to be treated as credible partners as well, They cannot approach regulators only when there are challenges. Maybe the license fee has been increased, or there has been enforcement on some operators, or a new tax is being proposed. There should be regular engagement. And to be fair and to be honest, in Nigeria, there are engagements. Maybe it needs to be more frequent. Maybe it needs to allow more time. It needs to be more structured. A bit more structure needs to be put around it, right? Operators also need to learn to engage early and provide data. We cannot say that regulations are being made based on assumptions without also positioning ourselves to provide reliable and necessary data. While I understand that every operator is very protective of their data, it's also important that at some point you have to share this data with industry stakeholders, and then also, if there are emerging risks, it's important that the regulators are notified well ahead of time, and that operators also contribute constructively to policy decisions. Regulators should not develop policies in isolation. If operators and other stakeholders want a seat at the policy table, then they must necessarily be objective. They must bring objectivity to the table. They must bring evidence. They must bring solutions and a commitment to responsible conduct. Now, another key stakeholder in the industry are the associations, because they generally, aggregate competing interests of operators and then make them into a sort of coherent industry position, which is then presented to the regulator. The association should also be, the platform and the engine for research, industry research, providing market data, develop codes and standards, and then build, their members' capacity as well. More importantly, associations should create a sort of interface between the industry and the regulators. An association will lose its credibility, if it is willing, to challenge every regulator, but is not willing to challenge his own members. So associations must also, from time to time, self-regulate. Collaboration, and then for relationship to move from adversarial to collaborative, it means collaboration must be institutionalized. Nigeria, like many African countries, relies heavily on personal relationship, who you know and how you know them. But trust in a regulated market should be institutionalized. It should be through institutions and not personalities. So rather than depending on whether a particular regulator or operator has a good relationship, with the regulator or the operator, there should be independent mechanism for fairly assessing, matters of engagement between regulators and operators. This would ensure that relationships are not adversarial, they're more collaborative. Now, to your question, responsible gaming in 5 years. How do we not sacrifice, or rather, how do we not grow at the expense of players in the industry? Again, as much as we know so far, up to date, responsible gaming initiatives are more or less discretionary, right? They're discretionary, they're at the discretion of the operators to a very large extent. Perhaps it is time for the regulators to start putting structure around responsible gaming, and they would need to lead by example. One of the questions that I like to ask, I know that for many state regulators who have gaming laws, the law does prescribe what the revenue should be used for. And for a number of those regulators, it does say health. Perhaps it's time for the regulators to lead by example by ensuring that part of the proceeds generated, revenue generated, is actually committed to cleaning up the side effect of the gaming industry, which is committing that to promoting responsible gaming initiatives, either by supporting the responsible gaming advocates or by providing services and access to treatment and training for problem gamblers. So the regulators should also be the ones championing the cause. If they lead by example, then it becomes easier for operators, to follow suit. In addition, perhaps the regulators can put in place frameworks such as recommending cooling off periods, the period, because right now it's at the discretion of, it's discretionary. It's not standardized across the industry. If someone self-excludes, what is the minimum period that self-exclusion should stand? I know that some states like Lagos State, they've got the Safe Play initiative, but it has to be widespread and it has to be national. Perhaps we need to have a national approach to responsible gaming. It cannot be done in isolation. It has to be a concerted effort of both that involves both operators and regulators, as well as those who are in advocacy. Again, to the advocates, I would say that yes, the awareness that is being created about responsible gaming is loud. It is out there. We hear you, but we hear you because we are stakeholders in the industry. Do the players hear you? Do they feel you? And how do they hear you? And how are they feeling the effect, of your services, of your activities? Are we moving? Perhaps we should move a bit more from social media to impacting those who actually, need the intervention and the help, as opposed to those of us who are aware of what responsible gaming should be. So it would be a combination of having the right responsible gaming policies, leadership by example from the regulators, and then having a structured use of responsible gaming tools for the industry, as well as, support and funding for those who are advocating, for the players. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ola Fadike. Now, because of our time, I will be asking Mr. Rinze very simple question. And looking at some of the things that we have been saying since, we realized that the Nigerian society often looks at the iGaming ecosystem as a vice on its own because other parts have not been explored. Now, what roles do you think government should play in developing the iGaming industry beyond just taxation, particularly in creating jobs for young Nigerians? This means developing digital skills and encouraging technology and innovation and ensuring that the economic benefits of gaming are felt more broadly, not just about those who are consumers. What would you say the government should do differently?
Yeah, so I have I touched on this in my earlier uh, presentation. I think government should not look at gaming simply as a source of tax revenue. I've said that before, because it is increasingly a technology driven industry, and of course it can become part of Nigeria's digital economy. Like I said, there's an entire ecosystem around iGaming, beyond the traditional operator. You now have software developers, you now have payment companies, you now have cybersecurity specialists, data analysts, you have compliance technology providers, you have content creators, of course, the game developers themselves, and then like Fadeke just, in her answer, you have the responsible gaming advocates, and of course the tech companies. So if we create the right environment, Nigerian young people should not only be employed by gaming companies. Of course, they will be building the technology, that powers the industry. And this is one of the conversations that we began to emphasize around during the Enugu conference. When we talked about code, capital, and compliance. We need capital, yes, but we also need Nigerian talent writing these codes. We need Nigerian talents building the solutions. Why regulation provides the confidence, and the safeguards, that will standardize the industry. And government's role, of course, should therefore include creating an environment where innovation can happen, responsibly, of course, supporting digital skills, encouraging investment in technology, of course, and ensuring that more of the value created by gaming remains within the Nigerian economy. Again, anything that would prevent capital flight, because we cannot move to the next level, if we consistently import the technology we use, import the expertise, import even the sometimes even the advisory, um, uh, sometimes are outsourced. So I mean, the whole conversation centers around the building, localizing the technology used to drive the industry here in Nigeria. So the role is to create that environment that will enable the local talent thrive, and then begin to build technology that we can actually not only use within the ecosystem in the country, but also export. And also we begin to build, develop a capacity, build our own experts that we can also not only use but also export into, of course, the Africa, and then the world at large. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We would like to take questions from those who have been following us. We believe you have questions. You can use the chat box wherever you're watching us from. The questions will pop right here. We'll be choosing a question to address. But before then, on the final note, Olafadike, what's that one note you want to leave? Something that we'll keep remembering and keep ensuring that we don't just put to paper but practicalize.
Thank you, Jesse. I think the world will continue to evolve, and everyone has to understand that evolving, this industry is an evolving industry. At the end of the day, gaming in Nigeria is not, it's barely been around for, it's less than 2 decades, right? So it finds itself in a situation where it is in a world where technology is impacting, and therefore it is evolving. So we're still evolving, and we almost have that at the back of our mind in how we approach and we assess this industry. Thank you.
Okay, we have a lot of comments here, and most of them are agreeing, not questions. But then let's go to Mr. Arinze. First of all, thank you to our host. They added a few minutes for us, and we are gradually coming to the end. So, Arinze, tell us, what's that one thing you would want to leave that you want us to act upon?
So I believe that Nigeria does not have a market problem. We have an opportunity to build, one of the most important digital markets in the world. But size alone does not mean success. We should build a market, where operators can invest with confidence. Of course, where technology companies can innovate freely, or government also earn significant but sustainable revenue. And most importantly, where players can participate in an environment that is fair. and transparent and properly protected. So it requires that regulators become more innovative themselves, because you cannot leave innovation to the business part and then the operators. You have to be innovative as a regulator to meet the industry stakeholders halfway. Um, um, of course, you have to be responsible. Being responsible goes both ways, regulators and operators. And then investors need to take a longer term view, and collaboration. The final word is collaboration. Collaboration is key between the critical stakeholders. I subscribe to what Faleke said. Constant engagement. That is the only way we will continue to mold and build the industry that we will all be proud of in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this is just a reminder that this webinar was organized by iGaming Africa and is a top media platform for within the iGaming industry, especially in Africa. So, to keep the conversation going, you can join our Telegram platform on iGaming Africa at iGaming Africa on our Telegram platform. Please, you can do that. I'm sure that other links will be dropped on the chat box. Okay, you can find it on the footer of this very chat. Thank you very much to our sponsors and, of course, to our hosts, most importantly, and to our panelists, Ola and Arinze, from your wealth of knowledge I've enjoyed today. So, Jeremiah Mangi, over to you. I don't know if you have any last words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olafadeke. Thank you, Arinze. Thank you, Jesse. That has been a really, really insightful session. For anybody who is looking at probably investing in the Nigerian market, you will have the word that it is a promising market. It is a market that you should certainly think of getting into as soon as possible. But also, I think we had an audience, and it will be good for us to sample some of the feedback. I think we have like 2 minutes. So we have Yemi Benson, who says nice one. But then there is a question. I really want, if somebody can answer it in like a minute, that technology is advancing more rapidly than regulation in Africa. What strategies can regulators adopt to keep pace with this rapid development? Because when you look at how the Nigerian ecosystem works, now states are, of course, having the authority to manage gaming within their states. But of course, there is this united front that has been done by regulators so that they can manage the industry together. But then considering what Fadeke said earlier, that today there are regulators that are united across all the states, but then tomorrow one of them moves out and you had a license or you become an illegal operator in one of those states, a very important point. So how can we probably use technology to ensure that, number one, we are united, and then number two, we are not really being left behind when it comes to regulation and even other things within the industry? Somebody maybe 1-2 minutes for that, and then we can call it a day.
Okay. Again, the industry, the innovation will always be ahead of the regulators and of the regulation. But the key thing is to get the fundamentals of the gaming operation. And we talk about legislation. Of course, you cannot legislate every time there's a new innovation. You can't keep pace. So, but the industry, the gaming operation has basics, has fundamentals. As a regulator, as a government, you have to have a legislation that that gives room for even emerging technologies and innovations in the industry, that you just have to tweak your regulations once in a while. But the key thing is that you cannot regulate a digital market manually. So regulators also need to invest in in regulatory technology. That way, you can keep tab, with the innovation, of course, and the margin, because the industry will continue to innovate. So you, as a regulator, you have to also, make use of technology, to be able to keep up with the innovations that are coming out, almost, more frequently than ever. So the key thing is to also invest in RegTech, and have a robust legislation that enables you, to keep up, with the pace of the innovation. Thank you. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was saying thank you so much for that. RegTech platforms, of course, very important for the regulators so that they can keep up with the changes technology-wise. And then we have a comment from Atom Dovalatian from LinkedIn. He says, definitely, it is a valid point. The requirements and regulations should be clear, so investors clearly understand what is the investment about. So I think that's speaking to the investors. And then I think Jesse was the moderator, but there is a question I would like to put to him just as we finish, so that we can end it at that last one. That having followed through with the webinar, I have one question for the panelists. Why are operators protective of their data? Is a regulation not supported to mandate that? Just like Germany, Lugas, UK affordability, etc. I think this one was to Arinze. And then for Jesse, is as Nigeria becomes more competitive. Of course, the previous question was from Ronald Awodeyi, and now this is to Jesse, connected to marketing. Kiama Charles asks, as Nigeria becomes more competitive, what type of affiliate partners do you believe will drive the most in incremental growth over the next 2 to 3 years? He asked SEO publishers, Telegram communities, influencers, tipsters, media buyers, or other models. I think you're from the media industry, you can help us to get that. But then Arinze, the previous one, on
Yeah,
why.
so and that is the centerpiece of the disagreement, between regulators and operators. Data, making data available to regulators. You see, operators has this technology. They will always, move ahead. They have the data. Their platform, houses the data of all their subscribers and players. Regulator, you know will need data to make, a well balanced and objective regulations, and then formulate policies. But you find out that it's a situation where operators are reluctant to share data, and when they do share data, you also find out that, they don't, give you the complete information you need. Now, on our part, we have, we've come up with, a solution to this, that you're able to have access to data, in real time. But then that again presented its own challenges. But like Fadeke said, it's a constant engagement. We must find a middle ground. But the fact remains that uh, data is key to making consequential decisions, that will ultimately affect the industry. And operators has the responsibility to share data with the regulators. They must meet regulators halfway, to be able to, because if I am going to give you some level of protection, if I'm going to, work, I should have an insight into what you are doing. If I am going to make proper policies and regulation regarding player protection, I should have complete, accurate data of
Okay.
what you do on your platform. So the responsibility is, as much as operators regulators continue to enforce that and then demand this data, operators should, it forms part of the compliance. They should comply with this information data sharing, because
Okay.
that's will go a long way into the structured and well regulated ecosystem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Uh,
Okay, Jeremiah
in
Mandi,
one
what I'll
line,
say is
please.
that
In one line. In one line. Okay.
okay, it's a trick question because we have visited a whole lot, and I'm not just as a marketing genius, but as a responsible gaming advocate. I would say we don't want a market that becomes too competitive that ignores the health of people also. So what I would say is that the best form of affiliate partners are those who will work within the confines of regulation and responsible gaming mindset. So that's what I would say for now, and stay
Okay.
safe. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this conversation with iGaming Africa, where we were joined by Olafadeke Akeju, the founder at Select Africa, and also a member at WYS Solitisas. I mean, a partner at WYS Solitisat. And then we have Arinze Arum, the executive secretary and CEO of the Nugu State Gaming and Lotteries Commission. And the session was proudly moderated by Jesse from the Gamble Alert in Nigeria. So thank you so much. We will have to end it at that. But as Jesse said, we can continue with this conversation. Please make sure you're following us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and across other social media platforms so that we can keep engaging. Until next time, it is bye-bye. But then we leave you with the videos appreciating the sponsors for the session today. Thank you so much. Keep it iGaming Africa.
Thank you. Thank you.